Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Auschwitz.
Wait, what? Did that sign actually say work makes you free? Well, that's irony for you. Now you might be wondering what Auschwitz was. It was a labor/death camp operated by Hitler's private army, the SS, from May 1940 to January 1945. It was composed of three main camps: Auschwitz I, Birkenau, and Monowitz. It became the main camp used in Hitler's final solution. Now this camp was huge. It spanned 5,000 football fields. That's crazy. And it was staffed by 6,500 to 7,000 members of the SS at any given time. Nearly 1.5 million people perished within those walls, and 90% of them were Jewish. That's why this camp was so important to Hitler's final solution. Though it seems impossible, 144 people managed to escape. They probably would have given Harry Houdini a run for his money. Those who managed to escape fled to other countries, and most of them fled to Canada. But everyone was not so lucky. The countless others who were imprisoned at the camp were forced into manual labor and horrible living conditions. One prisoner that survived told people of his experience in Auschwitz. Dr. Miklos Nitzli was a survivor, and this information was taken from his account of Auschwitz. Their day began at 4:30, 5:30 in the winters, and morning roll call usually lasted 4 hours. The prisoners received no breakfast, only a hot drink. The mornings were always cold, and the prisoners were forced to stand outside. They were ordered to line up and wait for the SS officers to arrive at 7 a.m. While they waited, they were forced to do squats. I don't know what that was about. They were punished for the most minor of things, like missing buttons or dirty food bowls. If anyone was found dead in the barracks, they would have to be present for roll call, held upright by their fellow prisoners. Workdays usually lasted 12 hours, less in the winters. Most of the work was done outside. No one was allowed to rest. They were given a thin vegetable soup at noon. On Sundays, the prisoners were to clean the barracks and take their weekly showers. They were also allowed to write letters in German. Those who didn't speak German had to give up their bread so that another prisoner could write it for them. In the evenings, a second roll call was done. If a prisoner was missing, all of the other prisoners had to wait until those who were missing were found. Once roll call was done, the prisoners were allowed to retire to the barracks for food and sleep. The prisoners slept in wooden bunks on their few personal belongings to prevent theft. There were usually 800 to 1,000 prisoners per block. The prisoners were distinguishable by a triangular colored patch called the winkle. Nationality was indicated by a letter stitched to the winkle. A unique feature to Auschwitz was also that prisoners were tattooed with their identification numbers. Prisoners in Auschwitz also experienced horrible sanitary conditions. Bathrooms weren't installed in the camp until 1943, 3 years after the camp opened. Many of the prisoners died because of these poor conditions. Disease and vermin ran rampant through the barracks. The building that you see right now is Block 11, the prison within a prison. Prisoners were taken to this block and forced to stand in standing cells that were no more than 16 feet squared. Prisoners that were sentenced to death were often starved to death. But some other prisoners were held in dark cells, where they died of suffocation. SS officers would sometimes put candles in the dark cells to speed up the process. Some were hung with their hands behind their backs so that their shoulders would dislocate. Now you're probably wondering, who would be crazy enough to stand up to these nut jobs? Well, a plan would commence when two Polish girls would arrive at the camp. A plan for retaliation. Esther Wojblum, 19, and sister Hannah, 14, arrived at Auschwitz in 1943. They were assigned to the munitions factory when they arrived. There they met the other women who were planning a revolt: Regina Saverstein, Alla Gertner, and Rosa Rabata. They would smuggle gunpowder to the men and would sometimes use the dead bodies transported by the Sonderkommando. The men would use the gunpowder to fashion grenades out of tin cans. In the time approaching the revolt, the prisoners obtained small arms and made knives. On October 7, 1944, at 3 p.m., the prisoners assigned to crematorium 1 through 4 began the attack. The Nazis were quick to retaliate with heavy machine gun fire. The guards were ruthless, killing anyone in their path. The prisoners from crematorium 4 were rebellious even in death because they blew themselves up with demolition charges. The revolt was suppressed and 200 prisoners were executed. Some of the men were taken by the SS for interrogation. They gave up the names of the 4 women, and this resulted in the hanging of the women. Now, even though this camp was full of nuts, there was one that stood out. Dr. Joseph Mengele was a truly frightening man. He was born on March 16, 1911, and he died on February 7, 1979. Before Auschwitz, he fought on the Russian front where he was wounded. He then came to Auschwitz as a doctor. His career at Auschwitz made him one of the highest-ranking officers in the SS. He would perform brutal experiments on certain prisoners. He took a deep interest in twins, people with 2 different colored eyes, dwarves, and people with physical deformities. He would even experiment on kids. He studied at Frankfurt University, receiving a medical degree. That probably looked good on his resume. This sick and twisted individual was merciless. He killed anyone he wanted. He killed a mother and her child because the mother would not cooperate. He then decided it was a good idea to kill the rest of the group. He enjoyed drawing blood from twins, and often they bled to death. He also once rounded up 14 pairs of gypsy twins and dissected them. He would do cruel and painful things like inject chloroform in their hearts. He then decided that he should share his research. He sent records of his work to Dr. von Verschuer at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, who thought it would be smart to destroy all of his research. There's no one here. What a perfect time to set fire to this Mengele fellow's research. That's pretty satisfying. When the Nazis' future began to look bleak, Mengele decided to escape Auschwitz as German infantry. He escaped to Argentina with a fake visa given to him by, wait for it, the Red Cross. And that's not all. They accidentally gave him and 4 other high-ranking SS officers fake visas. Hey you, come here. Who, me? No, the rubber duck behind you. Of course you! Okay. Do you want a fake visa? But don't you know who I am? No, I never learned how to read. Now do you want one or not? Argentina sounds nice. What's it like this time of year? Oh, it's beautiful. You'll love it there. Now take it quickly and get out of here. Looks good. When word got out that he had escaped, an international bounty of $2.375 million was set on his head. But he was never found. Alive, that is. He lived in South America for 35 years. He finally died of a stroke while he was swimming off the coast of Brazil. He was dragged to shore, but he had already drowned. He was buried under the false name Wolfgang Gerhard, an Australian national whose identity he had stolen. When his grave was found, people weren't sure if it was him. But a DNA match was done in 1992 and they confirmed that the remains found were indeed those of Joseph Mengele. But one cannot talk about Auschwitz without talking about those infamous gas chambers. These gas chambers were often large stone rooms made to look the same as the showers. They would often install shower heads in the ceilings to make it look like a shower, when in reality, those heads released the gas. SS members escorted those selected for execution. Men, women, and children marched to their deaths, and they didn't even know it. They would disrobe, and hundreds of naked prisoners would be packed into the chambers like sardines. A member of the SS would climb to the roof and release a gas composed of hydrogen cyanide, known commonly as Zyklon B. The prisoners would suffer through 15 minutes of agonizing suffocation. Other more sadistic members of the SS would watch through peepholes in the sides of the chamber. After everyone was dead, the Sonderkommando would collect the bodies and send them to the crematoriums for burning.